Again, hello everyone. I'm Gracie, your host, and welcome to the last Tech Talk for 2025. In this live session, we'll explore practical lessons to help you stand out and make an impact in your role. And you'll learn how unique projects and hands on experience can accelerate your tech career and how growth for most professionals doesn't come from technical skills alone. It also comes from tackling real world challenges, as we all do, collaborating across teams, and learning on the job. So, our speaker today is Mindi. I am not sure how to pronounce your surname. I apologize. But who transitioned from leadership roles in real estate and nonprofits to becoming a software engineer at Postman and a founding engineer at Audition Cat. She is also passionate about personal and professional growth. So, this is a very good talk for each and every one of us. And amplifying underrepresented groups in tech, particularly women and neurodivergent individuals. So, without further ado, let's give the microphone to our speaker. So, please join me in welcoming Mindy.
Thank you, Gracie. All right, let's see if I can share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right. I do have the chat box open rather, and I'm happy to answer questions as they come. So feel free to put it in there or jump off mute. I would love to be a little, have it be engaging. So with that said, welcome. Thank you all for being here, and I'm so excited to share with you. So let's see. Today I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself and my current role, what I'm doing now. We'll talk about a few of the real world projects that I work on. And then I would love to leave you with a few takeaways. So hi, I'm Mindi. It's Mindi Weik, if you're curious. I am a career changer, a software engineer. I'm neurodivergent, I have ADHD, and I like to talk about that as well. But I specialize in making systems work well together, which is kind of a vague way of saying, like, I can connect A to B. But one thing I'd really like for you to consider throughout, especially this next part where I talk about the journey, is it's worth considering what you really want. I started off with not much of a trajectory or like an end in sight. I graduated with a degree in communication, which was pretty like generalist. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Pardon me, I'm getting over a cold, so that I might have some of that. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had been working in nonprofits when I was a teen in high school and just sort of transitioned because that felt natural. I was offered a position, so took it. But I did a lot of marketing at nonprofits. I ran a small branch. I also ran an aquatics department in the Colorado Springs area. It wasn't really for me, and I wanted a change. So we actually were able to move up north in Colorado, and I kind of took whatever I could find at the time, which ended up being real estate. I started off as an assistant. I eventually got my license, and I was doing all sorts of stuff, including real estate marketing with my broker that I was working with. So I later took that on the show on the road on its own and tried out entrepreneurship, but none of these things were really hitting the spot for me, and I felt a little lost. And right around 2018, 2019, I did some digging, some soul searching, and I realized that I really wanted to be in tech. In college, I took some web design courses, and I loved it. I did a little bit of fiddling around with technology and computers all throughout high school and college. So I started to try to learn on my own, but I was just having such a hard time. Especially because, as I'm sure you all know, there's so much information out there, and it's hard to parse out like what's real or what actually matters. And so I actually went specifically to a boot camp in particular to foster relationships with other people, as well as like getting to know my teachers, my professors, and like being able to ask questions, being able to figure out what does this actually mean? Like help me put the pieces together. And also knowing that it's reputable, because again, with all that information out there, it's hard to know what's valid, what's real. But I do want to say while in that position, I did spend a lot of time communicating and building genuine connections, fostering deeper relationships with my teammates, my cohort, my instructors. And I think that that made it all the more worthwhile. And I think that also is what has made my role up to this point be more successful. Um, because whenever you communicate with your community, your cohort, like I said, your teammates, your coworkers, you really build that community. You really build good relationships where you want to help each other out, and not just if you're trying need to do more than just that. Like you need to be doing it consistently because that's how you're going to find opportunities you didn't even know existed, like talks, for instance. Or you might like find a actually we'll get into it in a moment, but that's partly how I ended up where I am now too. I there was a role that popped up that I didn't know about until someone that I'm friends with shared that with me. So we're right about here is where I kind of this is around the part where I realized I wanted to get into tech. But then COVID happened. I was in the running for an apprenticeship and it was put on everything was put on hold. So I decided to leverage my real estate background with like trying to get my foot into tech, and I found a role at a real estate SaaS company where I could kind of combine the two. And I started off in support, where I could use a lot of that like industry knowledge of real estate to really help me like dig into the technical side. And I dug into our APIs. Like I figured out how our system worked with other like third-party tools. And that's what really propelled me into like I did that for a while, and then that's what propelled me into actually taking the step to go into a boot camp, which I did actually. I transitioned to an onboarding manager while I was at Sierra Interactive, the real estate SaaS company. And I was very clear with my manager that this isn't really what I want to do. What I want to do is become a software engineer. And while I was doing full-time work, I was also taking classes nights and weekends and working my butt off so that I could eventually transition. And because I had built that connection, because I had communicated that this is what I wanted, when it was time, when I graduated and it was time to figure out what was next, lo and behold, my manager was really willing to like fight for me and advocate for me. And we ended up finding a role for me on the software engineering team. So that was my first engineering role. I had been there for a while and transitioned. And then after a while, I was ready to move on to get some more growth opportunities. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I didn't know about this role. Like it actually wasn't posted whenever I found out about it because a friend of mine, I had shared that I was interested in moving on. And as soon as something came up, she said, "Hey, this is on my team. Would you like to talk to the manager?" And here I am today. So let's see. Oh, um, so what do I do now? So I am currently a software integrations engineer. I am specifically focusing on that integrations piece, and essentially I like to call it or like describe it similar to like old school phone operator, which I kind of have pictured here. Each of these wires represents like a different tool or third-party software or even an internal tool that I'm unplugging, adding over here, moving something around to a different location, and it's been a lot of fun. And we'll talk about what these wires are in just a little bit when I talk about the real world projects. But most of what I do on my team is working on the marketing sites, so the front end sites that you would see if you were to visit postman.com and not be logged in. But my role is starting to morph and change. One important piece is, which we can talk about here now that we're going to talk about the wires, is that my role didn't exist before. So there was a lot of what I'm doing now that was sort of being handed off to different people, and they weren't able to really focus on it. And so my role was actually created specifically so that someone could focus on these integration pieces and making our platform, not the product, but our marketing sites work well with some of our third-party tools. So one of those third-party tools is privacy and consent. So we have a consent manager that helps us maintain compliance with on the legal side. It's not just to do that, it's also to provide a good user experience. And it's also a project where we focus on a solid implementation. Our previous implementation was very like surface level, but now we are really digging into it and trying to make it like a full, how do I want to describe it? Just a more fuller, richer experience that provides also automations to some of our teams, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Another project, these are also not all encompassing, but another big project that I work on is A/B testing. So we trial the effectiveness of different options. We test user engagement to see, like, does this button work better or does this button work better? The verbiage can also be a factor there. And all of this enables data-driven decision making. So there might be variants that work differently. And so we just, in order to make the decision of what will be like the visual long-term, we figure out, which one gets the most engagement and then keep that one. As I mentioned, verbiage can be a factor. So maybe saying it this way doesn't quite land, but this way works better. And so we track all of that. Track all of that engagement and then analyze it and then determine if there's a statistically significant difference and then go with the winner. The other major thing that I do is work on inventory, especially as a software, like focusing on the software integrations. There are a lot of tools that we maybe aren't using anymore or need to be updated. So that's what I do. I take stock of what tools we're using or not using, and then I work on the cleanup and migration so that we can, stay up to date and make sure it's all clean and we don't have as much tech debt as we possibly could. And also we have, I think, 12 to 15 different projects that my team owns, maybe more. So there's several projects that I have to manage that inventory on. And next, I would like to talk to you about some of the challenges with my current role, but I would also like to be very clear that these challenges are actually part of the reason why I enjoy my job. One of the things I really like doing is leaning into the hard stuff. So the first challenge is actually improper implementation or like unknown unknowns. So I mentioned our previous data privacy and consent management implementation was a little bit surface level. So it's not that it was wrong, but it just had never really been updated. So at a certain point, we had to like sort of tear out what existed and make sure that it was correct and up to date. And then now we're adding on top of it. But there was a lot that we didn't really know because someone had sort of just put it in there at first. So those are some of the things that I come across is like figuring out like figuring out how it was before, how it needs to be now. But I think I just hit 6 months like a week or two ago. So there's still plenty of unknowns that I don't know. So that's another challenge that I have to face. Another one is vague requirements and research being required. Part of that is because I now have a lot of stakeholders. In my previous role, it was mostly just my teammate and I, which we'll talk about later. But now I have like marketing team, legal team. I've been working with the infrastructure team. I actually have recently talked to our support team and someone on the academy team, like our courses. So I have a lot of stakeholders, which is actually really fun for me. But there's a lot of different, like, they don't know exactly what I need and I don't always know what they need. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen in order to make sure that we're on the same page. And a lot of times I have to do research because, as I mentioned before, no one was doing this before. So this is all new. And in order to like figure out how to do it the right way, I have to do a lot of research to figure out how it was done, what needs to be done, that sort of thing. The next challenge that I face often is caching, CSP, which is content security policy, and environments. So with environments, typically in a work setting, you'll have like a staging or a testing environment, maybe a beta, or like they might have different names, but like an environment before it gets to production and then a production environment. And we try our best to make sure that they are as close as possible, but sometimes it's just not possible. So there are some times where I will have a feature branch that builds in like the staging environment. I move it over to beta and it works, but then there has been cases where I move it over to production and it doesn't work the same way. So that's a challenge that happens occasionally. Thankfully, not very often, but occasionally. Another thing I come across often is caching. So we have a Next framework on most of our applications, and Next has built-in caching as part of its whole shebang. So occasionally I bumped up against that. Occasionally it's been at the next layer where it's like the S3 bucket, the Amazon AWS, like whatever tools we have there. And then occasionally it's been at a higher level where it's Cloudflare, and another team manages that. So it's not always easy to do cache clearing and figure out where the issue is. But that has been an issue occasionally, is like, I made a change, why isn't it showing up? Because there's some caching going on that we have to figure out. Content security policy is essentially a way to make sure that only the requests that you want to go through are going through from your application or your platform to another service. And I have to do that on our applications, but then also on some of our third parties. You want to make sure that that third party request is only going to your application. So you have to basically put in like the domains that are being used. And then the last challenge I want to talk about is collaboration, particularly when it comes to asynchronous communication. Because I have all of these stakeholders, I've talked with probably about 10 or more different teams and even more different people. So there's been a lot of communication that has to happen, and we are a global organization, so a lot of it is actually async. I am personally a remote employee, so there's a lot of that. And with that said, I would love to provide some tips that I think would be really helpful if you haven't had as much experience or if you're like struggling here and there. The first tip is to be concise. So if you draft something up to write, stop, cut it, repeat. Basically just like keep cutting it down until your message is like as small as possible, but without losing the real context of the message. And the reason is because no one's going to read your novel. They want to read like a couple of sentences, they get the gist of what you want, and then it will help them help you, which we'll talk about in a second too. Another one is that niceties can go a long way. So adding in a personal note, like saying hello, adding a compliment like, oh, wow, I really liked what you did in this documentation, and I'd love to pick your brain on blah, blah, blah. Or even just asking, how was your weekend, can be really helpful to just sort of build that rapport and ease some tension if there is any. The next one is helping others. And I think that there's two factors here. The first is helping them help you, which I was kind of talking about in being concise. Because if you don't know exactly what you're asking them to do to help you, people are less likely to help you, but also they don't really know what to do sometimes. If you want others to help you, like giving them something very clear, actionable, and hopefully not too hard for them will definitely make them want to help you out. And the second factor is that if you help others, they are much more likely to help you in return. There's been a few people that have seemed unresponsive until like I've started to help them, and they like, by fostering a cooperative attitude and environment, it's no longer a transactional relationship. It's really just like, hey, let's like work together and collaborate to get this going, whether it's your project or my project. Giving feedback. So what advice do I have for giving feedback that improves work without discouraging teammates? I think, first of all, asking if they are willing to receive it is a big one. Like, hey, I've noticed like something, would you mind if I share a little bit about it or share how it's affecting me? Another thing that I would advise is like trying to keep it about the behavior and not about the person. So, hey, I've noticed that you have done XYZ, and I've noticed because of that, like this is happening. What do you think about that? Or have you tried such and such? But coming at it from a place of curiosity also helps too. So ask before you give. Let's see, treat it, focus on the behavior, not the person. And then also, oh, what was the third one I just said? Darn it. Oh, I lost it. But anyway, I think that that would be helpful for feedback for other people. Don't make assumptions is my next tip. I have yet to meet a mind reader I'm not a mind reader. So it's typically best to ask questions. It adds clarity. It like aligns you on the same project or the same timeline or whatever it is. And it really just it clears the air. So ask lots of questions. The next one, especially for asynchronous communication, is scheduling a message or prefacing it with like something like as you have time, or um, like when you have a moment, something like that, or not urgent, but I was wondering if I could, ask you a question. I really love Slack's scheduling feature for messages. If you ever get a chance to play around in there, I work with people across all different time zones. Like I was recently talking with someone in Australia and didn't want to interrupt them. It was like a Friday afternoon. I was like, I need to make sure that they see this, but I don't necessarily want to like ping them on their weekend. So I scheduled a message for a little bit earlier than I usually get on, but like when I know that they are still on, like the end of their day. And it was nice because we were able to have a little bit more of a back and forth because of that. So consider other people's time zones. People might have different priorities from you, which is why that preface is really helpful too. And then also, it's much easier for someone to help you if they're not annoyed because they were interrupted. So that is always helpful. The last one I want to bring up is to always consider the best intentions of other people. It's pretty rare that somebody is actually targeting you. It's more likely that they are having a bad day, or they are stressed about a deadline, or any number of things. So whenever possible, I guarantee that you and the other person that you might be interacting with will have a much better experience if you assume best intentions. And you can always ask questions to clarify if you're like, this feels a little off. Like, did I understand this correctly? Sometimes that helps a lot. Let's see. How can teams avoid burnout caused by constant notifications and messages? Um, I haven't experienced that at a team level, but definitely at a personal level, like, different people on the team. I think a lot of that has to do with boundaries. So whether it's like setting something in your calendar to, like, I'm only going to look at messages between this time and this time, or well, what's the other one I'm thinking of? So like time blocking is one, and then I think also just letting people know that you're busy, or like, especially if it's asynchronous communication, excuse me, having like a different status is helpful so that people know like, oh, they're in the middle of like heads down work, or they have a deadline approaching. I think that can be really helpful. And then once you get into burnout mode, you have to sort of step away. So hopefully you don't get there. Been there, done that, not fun. But now let's move on to some of the real world projects because I think they're fun. The first one I want to talk about is actually with my previous company, Sierra Interactive. So I was working on an API integration with Twilio and A2P10DLC, which is application to person 10-digit long code. There's not a quiz. You do not have to know that. But basically, Twilio is a voice over internet protocol or provider. It's a VoIP service, basically like an internet phone line. And so for our users, we provided calls, texts, voicemails, automated messaging, and different things like that. But essentially what we did is we created a microservice to replace existing messy processes within this older application. And this is sort of me depicting like a cute little microservice. The old service was mostly just outdated because it had been a while, but it's also a monolithic repo. So it was just one big project. And so we wanted to take out this third-party vendor service so that it would reduce potential security risks and potential, like, if an error occurred and it took down our whole platform, then that would be a huge problem. So basically it provided safety, like an extra layer of safety that we could put between us and this third-party vendor. So one of the challenges is that as I mentioned, this was an older project for me. This was straight out of boot camp. I did not learn C# and .NET, and I still haven't. So one of the biggest challenges was actually reading the code, which I needed to do in order to figure out how we were currently like using the service, how we might be able to talk, like how our existing service might be able to talk with our new service so that we would make as little interruption as possible and require as little changes as possible. And it was a hard thing to do because when I was working on this, it was sort of at the beginning of AI getting context. So it was not very context aware like it is now in the IDEs. But I did try. AI did an okay job at the time. And then also another challenge that we had is that a lot of C# applications in my experience work better or like mainly work with Windows machines. And my teammate and I were working on Mac OS, and we were able to pull down the repo and look at the files, but we were not able to get the like the awareness within the IDE. So I don't know if you have experienced this or anything where you click on like a file, a name, a function name, or a variable name, and it'll take you to the definition so you can read more about it and understand how it works. We didn't have any of that. So there's a lot more manual sifting through trying to figure out what was going on. The other challenge was picking up TypeScript. So the new project was entirely in TypeScript. And yes, it is a superscript of JavaScript, but there's a lot more rules to add to, like, especially for someone who wasn't super professional at the time. Like, I just got out of boot camp. Yes, I've been practicing with JavaScript for a while, but I wasn't working on TypeScript. And there are rules, there are ways to do it in a way that is efficient and effective. And so I was learning while I was building. So kind of that learning to build the plane while you fly it analogy, which was a challenge, but a good one. The next one is that I was working on a small team. It was just my teammate and myself. And, you know, with one person, it's hard to get good feedback. You really only get one person's point of view. I did try really hard to reach out to other people and like work on other projects, but it, you know, you're working with this person all day, every day. It's really hard to get feedback from that. Additionally, because it was just the two of us, the business had shifting priorities. And so there were a few times where we had to separate and work individually on different projects, which is not recommended, but had to happen sometimes with logistics. And so I was working on this project, they were working on another project, and then we eventually came back together. But then we had to sort of reform the team. If you've ever heard of like the storming, norming, I don't remember all of them, but like you have to kind of get back into the swing of things. And that was very challenging as well. There are a few tips that I can share from this experience, though. The first is that context is key. So ask lots of questions. I was very beneficial that I had actually worked with A2P10DLC and Twilio in my support days when I was working with this company. So I was helping, to that extent, I was helping our customers register as businesses so that they could text people, text and call people. And so I had a pretty good understanding of the actual, like, what it is and why, but I didn't have much on the tech side. So I had to ask a lot of questions to get up to speed on that side. And also, I think it's important to remind everyone that even if you are meeting with like the vendor, we had a couple of times where we met with Twilio, like technical support engineers and technical architects, to make sure that we were doing this in a way that made sense, because there was a lot of like legal changes throughout all of this. And that's why it was so messy also, is that as this was being adopted, there were lots of changes, not just from Twilio, like from the national perspective. And so we had to ask a lot of questions about the architecture to make sure with this new service that we were doing it in like the most recommended way. And there were a lot of things that we did end up changing. Another important tip is to work with like when working with SDKs, it is super helpful to read the documents. I know it kind of isn't fun, but getting to know how they expect you to use the tool. AI has done a really good job of, like, especially if people set up the llms.txt where it can provide the context of your documentation that's online to LLMs. AI has done a pretty good job of helping to like summarize some of those things. But if you can, read the documentation, because you'll get a sense of how you're actually supposed to use an SDK. And if you're not familiar, an SDK is a software developer kit, software development kit. It's basically like API tools or tools that you can use to communicate with their application or service. The next thing is, using a playground, whether you're working with an SDK or just trying out a code snippet. Particularly when working with this project, I actually had a separate project locally that I would use to like play with some of these API key call or API calls rather. So for instance, like what does a phone number look like? A phone number lookup look like? So I would make a request, like try out a few different variations, see if I could break it, see if I could get it to work properly, and then see what data came back so that I would then have a better sense of how to solve the problem when I got there. Cool. I think that's everything on the Twilio side. Is there any questions on this before I move on? I know I'm talking a lot and moving quickly, so. All right, I'll keep an eye out. The next project I want to talk about is one that I'm working on currently, which is the data privacy and consent management software. As I mentioned, this was a legal initiated project, and the overarching goal is to make sure that we are compliant with privacy rules and regulations across the globe. There are a ton of different ones. Just to name a couple, there's GDPR in the EU, which is a really big one, a very strict one. And then there's also California in the US has CCPA and CPRA laws. I am not a lawyer. These are just ones that I've read about. I have a book I can recommend that talks about some of them if you're curious. But yeah, there's a lot of different rules. There's like different ones for every country. There's municipalities. A lot of states in the US have their own rules and regulations. So there's a lot to consider here. And one of the biggest challenges, I'll jump into that real quick, is that I had to learn a lot about consent basics. Like I reviewed a lot of those different rules and laws just to figure out like what is allowed, what is a possibility, and what's not allowed. But essentially, this project is meant to help users manage their privacy selections and then also provide another layer of like transparent disclosures. So for instance, with California in particular, they have the CCPA, CPRA is about sale and share of info. So we have a thing that we can provide a little disclosure to users if they're curious about that. And then if you look at this little chart, diagram, whatever we want to call it, here's essentially how it works. So we have multiple different sites. I think I said like 12 or 15. Some of them are on the Next.js framework. Some of them are still on Gatsby, but we're moving those out of there. And some of them are also on like CMS tools. So for instance, our academy that we offer our courses through is through Skilljar, I believe. And like there's a couple of different tools that provide services that you can like inject code like this where we need to manage like consent and cookies. But yeah, they're all different, but they all do the same thing in that they tell the consent management software, hey, like I'm here. It checks its CSP, which we mentioned earlier, the content security policy, to see which services have been approved, which ones are not approved and should not go through. And we actually have a very strict policy. So if we don't own it, it's not getting through, which is kind of nice in some ways. But essentially, it'll check all of that information and then send it back to those sites. And it's really cool because our tool in particular will queue up any requests that need to happen on the website. So like before any other like API calls or network requests go through, it sits in a queue. And then once it comes back from the consent manager, it says like, this one's not approved, so that just stays in the queue. This one is approved, so you can send that out. Oh, this one's approved, you can send that out. And it's actually really cool to kind of watch it. It's just fun. But anyway, some other challenges that we ran into with this is, as I mentioned, this was originally a very surface level implementation. So we did, because we planned on going a lot broader this time, we did a lot of internal digging and researching to figure out like, what are we missing? How can we do this in a better way? I had to do a lot of research to figure out how like these next steps that we're working on will need to be implemented as well. So there was a lot of digging and learning and figuring out how to make it work. The next challenge was unexpected stakeholders. So one thing that I didn't expect when we turned it on is that like our support chatbot went down because we didn't communicate well enough to figure out what that request looked like or what needed to happen in order for it to like be able to go through. Because as I mentioned, we have a very strict policy. So There were a lot of people who came, not a lot, there was a few things that came out of the woodwork after we turned it on and went live that needed to be like, we went through troubleshooting to make sure that we could make it work for them. And the next one is that this is an ongoing project. It was meant to be just like a month or two, one and done, wipe my hands clean. And that's not what ended up happening. In fact, it seems like it's going to be a very long-term project. There's a lot of maintenance that wasn't as obvious. And there are extra layers, like I said, that we're adding in. So data subject requests are the ability for users to say, hey, I want to see my data. What do you have on me? Or delete their data. And so we are going to automate that process. Right now it's very manual. So that's like one of the next big steps is figuring out how to connect systems together so that we can automate that retrieval of data for users so they're not waiting 45 days and then deleting it in the case that they would like to be removed. As far as tips go, once again, ask all the questions because I was new to this sort of concept. I did not work in data privacy and consent management before. So I needed to do a lot of digging to understand how things are supposed to work, but then also how things are supposed to work internally. I was new to the organization, which is helpful in order to be able to like ask those questions, like who owns this? Or how does this actually work? It helped a lot with making sure that we did things properly. And also I got to talk to a lot of people, which was really fun. So ask as many questions as you can. Also approach with patience. So as I mentioned, this was supposed to be like a couple months. And I mean, so I just hit 6 months. So it's been like 4 or 5. And as I mentioned, it's going to go well into the next year and beyond. So make sure that you are aware that, and actually similarly with the last project, it was meant to be like a 6-month migration. And I think I worked on it about 2 years. Things that seem cut and dry usually aren't. So best laid plans rarely actually happen like on those deadlines. You'd be pretty lucky if you found a place where you were on time every time. So approach with patience. The other tip is to test thoroughly, especially because this was such a big deal. There's legal compliance involved. It's a global audience. There was a lot of testing that happened to make sure that it worked the way it was supposed to and make sure we didn't miss anything. So testing thoroughly, especially when it's important like this, is huge. Then the last project I want to talk about is experimenting with A/B testing, which is one of the other things that I'm working on now. So we installed a tool that allows us to track and send data and get that analyzed for decisions. So from a user perspective, ideally, they won't know that they're in the test and they are just seeing one variant or another. And that experience might vary, will likely vary. So if you look at the little diagram here, if we start this time on the left with the browser, we have an Next.js application, which then reaches out to our testing tool to see, hey, what variant should this user be? And especially because we are on the marketing sites, we are getting people from all over who are not necessarily users. We can't store those things, so we do reach out to this tool through an API. And then it returns which one it should be, which in this case was the A variant. So it returns that to the browser shows that variant, and then we take information on how the user interacted with it, which one they saw, and how they interacted with it, so that we can then send that to a storage space where we can then analyze that information and make decisions. So some of the challenges with A/B testing is coordination. Not only do you have to like make it work within the code base, but you also have to get the information from the person requesting the A/B test. So like, what are we measuring? How long are we doing it? What is a winning variant? Like, what does that mean to you? So there's a little bit of coordination and back and forth with that. There's the coordination of getting it to go live at like, especially if you want it to be at a certain time, you might have to coordinate with your team to make sure that that release happens at the time it's supposed to. It includes what it should, especially if other people have their own needs to get something out. And then there's also, what is the other thing I wanted to mention on coordination? There was something else, but there's a lot. of moving parts with an A/B test. The next challenge is loading, especially with Next.js. As I mentioned, we have that caching issue that I sometimes ran into because it's a server-side rendering thing, so it like pre-renders everything and hydrates everything before it shows up on your browser. And one challenge with that is that during this part, you'll see there's like a little loading screen here because you do have to wait for that response. We have had challenges with like, especially if we do like a full page variant, which I'm not a huge fan of, but is a possibility. Like, okay, so you either see this version of the page or you see this version of the page. I don't like that because it's hard to tell what's actually working, especially if they are very different. It's hard to know what part actually made it work better. But then also I have to add, like, I ended up adding an overlay screen similar to this so that, you know, it didn't look like you were just sitting on a blank screen. So part of that is going into the smooth experience, which we'll talk about in a moment. Another challenge is targeting components. So we actually have sort of a JSON page structure, which is kind of neat to work with. And then we work with React. But they're like all overarching or like wrappers. And so I was originally starting at the top with this React component and trying to target a specific page or a specific piece of just the specific page. But I am happy to say, actually yesterday and today, I just finally solved the ability to target components by creating a wrapper component, which you can then provide different variations of what component you're trying to like. So for an example, right now, we are getting ready to launch a test that has a single button versus two buttons to interact with on this particular page. And so I basically provided two versions of this component to this wrapper that then tells the browser which one it should see. Kind of cool. Another challenge, as I mentioned, is that smooth experience. So you don't want to just look at a blank screen. And you also don't want to see a flash, which happens a lot with A/B testing. And it makes it obvious, and it's not like it's like a pause. It's like, oh, what's happening here? It's very jarring. And in order to avoid that, a tip I can share is to stay below the fold. So if you are thinking about a browser, like if this is your browser window, what you see here is above the fold. Anything that you have to scroll down to is then below the fold. But it's nice to target things below the fold because then they don't see if like something changes or if there is a flash for that component, because typically users will, at least for a moment, stay on that above the fold line and then eventually scroll down. And that's about all you need for the response to come back from your testing tool. Another quick note is to document everything. I'm actually standing up this like service, I guess we could call it, where I'm like implementing these A/B tests that are being requested. So I'm documenting everything because right now I'm doing all of the work, but eventually we would like other people to be able to do it as well. So if I document how I do it, you know, if I'm out of the office or if I'm on vacation, there is something there for someone to look at and refer to. And going back to the collaboration tips, make sure that it is concise. So like writing up things is pretty quick, but then going back through and making sure that like, oh, this is like 2 sentences, but it could be one to make it more clear and more concise. I do a lot of reviewing and editing just to make sure that people actually want to read it. Nobody wants to read documentation, but if you make it easier, it's a little less painful. Last one is making small changes, which is true across any development of software too. If you make smaller changes, it is much easier to figure out like what actually worked. So from the A/B testing side, like I mentioned, we're doing the 1 button versus 2 buttons. Which one actually works better? It's pretty obvious. It's either with or without that second button. When it comes to development, like if you're troubleshooting something or trying to like debug, taking small steps and then checking is really helpful to figure out what actually went wrong, and helpful to figure out how you can fix it. So definitely take a look at small changes. Okay, so all of that being said, if you remember absolutely nothing from this talk, I would love for you to walk away with like one or two of these at the very bare minimum. The first is that there are no stupid questions. And I have actually been encouraged and not praised, but like people appreciate it whenever I ask a lot of questions for the most part. So there are no stupid questions. Ask away. It adds clarity, it removes assumptions, and it really helps with alignment. Even if it seems really silly, like the other day I just asked, like, this is what it looks like now, and this is what it says it should look like. Is that right? Um, and I found out the answer, which helped me actually complete the project. So ask away. The second is network, network, network. Even if you're working and you're not trying to find a job, you should continue to engage with your community. You should continue to connect with people and build relationships both at work and, in side projects or whatever else you're doing, because you never know what opportunities are going to come your way. Like I said, I didn't know that this role existed. It was being made as I was finding out about it. So keep talking to people. The next one is to remember the golden rule. Kill them with kindness. Always expect the best intent. And you can even ask for preferences. If you're like butting heads with people over and over again, you can talk to them about like, hey, I've noticed we're having a hard time communicating about this. How would you like me to talk to you about this? Would it be better if I, like write up all the things? So if you're coming up against a senior engineer who's like getting kind of aggravated when you ask them for help, like, how can I work on this? It might be that like you document or like list out the things that you've done so that they don't have to go through all of that too. You're wasting their time. So you can ask for preferences or ways to help improve that communication. And the last one is to lean into your challenges. You can leverage your existing skills to propel your growth, tackle a new problem. I can almost guarantee you that you know more than you think you do, especially as you're like going through this learning phase. And whether you're in a boot camp, you're learning on your own, whatever you're doing, you know more than you think you do. So if you lean on things that you already know, for instance, when I was at Sierra Interactive, I leaned on my real estate knowledge so that I could help connect some of those moving pieces. So you know more than you think you do. And you've got this. All that being said, thank you so much for having me. I would love to connect with any or all of you. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Mindi Weik, MindiWeik. And you can also, if it's easier, you can go to mindi.omg.lol, which is a fun place where I have like all sorts of different things listed. So I would be more than happy to chat with you. I also keep my LinkedIn DMs open. So if you have questions, feel free to ask.
We
And
actually do have one from Ronald.
yeah.
All right. I think I should read it.
Ooh,
Ronald says
okay.
he is a new graduate from Triple Ten AI Automation Program. Networking is something that makes him nervous. So, do you have any tips for him?
Yes. Let me stop sharing real quick so that I can see a little better. A couple of things that I would recommend is if you don't like in person, I know there are people who have trouble with in person. You can absolutely network. Like I have LinkedIn friends who I've never actually like talked to, but like this way or in person. But I talk to them all the time and like interact with them and engage with them, and they're willing to help me out. So you can do a lot of that, like DMs or even just commenting on LinkedIn is helpful. You can attend webinars like this and just sort of start to like, sometimes you'll run into somebody that you're like, wow, I really like that person, or I like the way they're thinking. I have connected with some people through webinars before. If you're going in person, I really like to recommend finding a place that feels safe to you, particularly for like women and underrepresented groups. Like there are specific groups out there for you. I actually help organize one here in Colorado for women in tech, and it can be a little overwhelming. And even if you're like a man in tech, finding a safe space to go is helpful. So you can at least start to like um, just get in there and like experience it. And then once you have a friend or two or like familiar faces, you can start to do it a little more easily. But you can also bring a friend. Have it just going somewhere where you have a friendly face to get you out there and just do it is helpful. And I will say there are times where I don't want to go even to an event that I'm organizing, but I have found that if I just sort of push through it, I have I don't think I've ever been sad that I did it. It will always be hard, but it's worth trying. And like I said, you can lean into more of those virtual experiences or um, chat experiences if that's helpful to at least do something and try to like build those connections. We have another one. What advice do you have for developers unsure which skills or technologies to focus on next? That's a great one. Um, I think there's a couple of things I'm thinking of. The first is like, what are you interested in learning? Because if you're curious, you'll actually be more likely to like want to dig into that and want to follow it through. So I would say if you're curious about something, go for it. And then also if you're trying to specifically focus on oh, Next.js is like the next big thing, because I've heard that before. If there's roles, like if you're looking at roles that excite you, whether you're looking for a job or not, like if there's even like somebody else's role within the company that you're looking at, like you're like, I like what they do. You can start to ask questions of them. Ask, like if you're looking for a job, you can ask people who are in a role that's very similar and like, what do you do every day? Like, so you can investigate and try to figure out what people are doing in roles that you would like to do. And you can also just sort of look at job boards to see what is popular. But I think the best one, at least for me, has been to follow that curiosity, because I'm so much less likely to follow through on something. It's like ADHD. It's if I'm not interested in it, it's like pulling teeth. It's like trying to trudge through. So it's been really helpful to find something that I'm actually interested in to move forward with.
All right. Everyone, you can still drop the questions, but while we wait, I do have questions for Mindy.
All
I,
right.
actually, I do have bunch one. I've been trying to like keep it till the end. But my first question is for someone who is unsure what kind of project to build, because some of most of us were probably just still starting or just finishing a boot camp or finishing college degree. Um, what kind of project what kind of project they should build, or what questions should they ask about themselves before they get started in doing real codings and all.
It's a great question. um, as far as projects, I think so the audition cap project that I work on is actually because one of my cohort mates asked if I wanted to help with this project. And I was really excited to learn. So that was one thing. If projects come to you, be open to them. As far as your own projects, like I'm getting ready to start a new one where I'm creating a dashboard for my hydroponic garden. Not very exciting, not very like usable for other people, but again, going back to that curiosity piece, like I'm interested in doing this. It's for me. And that will help me. I'm actually revisiting TypeScript and some other tools that I don't use very often because I miss using them. And also AI like does all the work for me, and I want to remember how to do things. So I don't have as much pressure time-wise to do it on my own. And the other question was, what kind of questions should they ask themselves? Is that right, Gracie?
Yes. Yes, yes.
That's a really good one. I think, huh, I don't know. I don't know if I have a solid answer for that one, but I think similar to like when you're looking for what do I do in a hobby, or like what am I going to do for my next job? Consider what would actually try to like truly make you happy. Um, it might be that curiosity piece. It might be what will make you more money. Whatever it is for you, I think asking yourself some of those questions would be helpful. If I think of other questions, I'll let you know. But I think you just have to sort of dig deep and ask yourself, like, what did I like doing as a kid? What do I like doing on the weekends? And figure out how you can sort of so my hydroponic garden project is supporting something that I like doing outside of work, but then also helping me grow on my own. Does that make sense? And is that helpful?
Yes, actually, because I do have encountered a student as well, or at the same time me as well, um, that I do, we can all admit that we're just not focusing on one coding language, programming language. We learn, like you mentioned earlier, that you're not familiar with C sharp, but you had to do the C sharp uh, language, and we can sometimes say that, hey, I'm good at Python. should I just do Python instead, even though I know JavaScript? Should I focus on finding jobs that focuses more on Python instead of like JavaScript? So I just won't go like everywhere on my job search thing. So I think yep, asking some personal questions about on what you should do also would probably answer that what kind of programming language I should focus on instead.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that too, I know I keep talking about this curiosity piece, and I feel like I have the luxury of saying it that way because like I do have a role and I know it's challenging out there, but I do think that it's more likely that you'll get something if you're doing something that you enjoy. So if you know JavaScript and you're like, oh, I need to learn Python because that's where the jobs are. If you don't like doing it, are you going to like doing it every day at your job? So I think leaning into that curiosity piece is helpful because you'll answer questions better in your interviews. Like you'll come off a lot stronger. And again, if you don't like doing it every day, are you going to like doing this in your job? So I think that's another way to think about that curiosity piece is like, how can I be the best me whenever I show up to interviews or whenever I'm showing up to work every day? So
All right. So in connection to my question, before I can see Desiree has a question, but I have a follow-up question on
sure.
my question. But since we're talking about like projects and what if I decided already, okay, I can do I'm going to focus on this project. I'm going to focus on this language. Would it be better if I do it just, a full deep dive into this project that could take 3 months or 6 months? Or should I just do instead of like bunch of smaller projects instead first?
That's a good question too. I think it depends on like your passion and excitement for the project. So, what I would recommend is in any case, starting with like the smallest thing possible. So start with your MVPs, your minimum viable product of your projects, because you might you might like start a big project that might take 3 months and then realize like, oh, I don't like that, or maybe this isn't the right tool, and you know that pretty quickly and can pivot instead of spending 3 months like banging your head against the wall hating what you're doing or like struggling with it because it's just not the right tool. Instead, you can do MVPs, see if it works. I mean, you can throw it away, you can try it again a different way. That's the beauty of those is you move quickly, you get something working, and then you improve upon it if you like it and you want to keep going. And it's the same at work. Like I make MVPs all the time, and then if it works, great. We like figure out how to implement it, and now I know a little bit more about it, so I can do it in a stronger way, if that makes sense. So.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, let's move with Desiree's question. How do you stay motivated during times when career growth feels slow or uncertain?
Yeah, I actually experienced this when I was at Sierra Interactive because, again, this project was supposed to take like 6 months, maybe a year for that migration of the Twilio API project. And it was dragging on. And I was feeling burnt out, especially after having completed my boot camp, working all day and then nights and weekends at the boot camp. I was burnt out, I was exhausted, and the project was kind of boring at a certain point. So what I did is I spent as much time as I could working on things that I wanted to learn. So like I started taking a DevOps boot camp, which I need to get back to because I ended up getting my role in the middle of it and just haven't gotten back to it yet. But like I had interest in that, so I was taking courses on the side. I was working on Audition Cat and other projects that I have on the side. Um, and I was communicating and networking and just sort of like reaching out to other people to see like what are you doing? Like in some ways it's interesting to hear from other people about their growth so that you know like you don't know but you get different ideas of how you can grow. Yeah, I think that that's helpful. So working on projects, taking courses, doing things that you can control, if that makes sense, especially if you feel like you're stuck in your current role or like you said, Desiree, like my growth feels a little bit like I don't know where I'm going. You have control over you and what you do, and finding things that help you feel more fulfilled and excited and growing on your own is a perfectly valid way to get through that. or finding ways to incorporate it at work too.
Yeah,
You don't have to do it all outside of work.
I think we've been in all of us. I think we've been in this situation.
Yeah.
I think most of us here have encountered this. But anyway, um, all right. Don says that thanks for the presentation. Very good. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. So I do have one. I think one last question because it's
Oh yeah.
already past two. But I do have a question. This is just like a reflection to everything. Um, if you could give one piece of advice to someone on our attendees or to everyone who's going to be able to watch this recording, piece of advice to someone early in their tech journey, what would it be?
Oh, you kept it vague. So like any advice at all?
Any advice at all?
Well, I think all the things that I said, but I think I think it's important to remember patience, and it's important to remember like taking breaks. It was super duper easy to burn out at the very beginning, especially because I was very hungry. Like I was trying really hard. I was hustling. I was trying to move up in the world. It was so easy to burn out. And then I was like, did I make a mistake? Am I like stuck here now? But I really like what I do. And finding ways to take breaks, whether it is like a literal, I'm going to go take a water break or walk, or if it's like, I'm going to take the weekend off. Remembering that you're a human and finding support around you is huge. So, yeah, take breaks, find support systems.
All right. I think that is a very good advice to avoid really burnout because it happens. It can happen. Like my question earlier, it can happen a lot.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
probably will at some point. It's hard to avoid sometimes.
but yeah, just think like I think what we talked about before we started the event. We mentioned earlier that taking breaks, um, taking a walk before like we mentioned earlier, taking a walk before the event before you go on a meeting. Well, trying to stay away from caffeine as well before
Oh yeah.
meetings and probably events as well. So it's okay
Ronald,
to take
don't take
caffeine, guys.
caffeine before you go to an event, Ronald.
It's okay to take caffeine, but not just like 30 minutes before the event or your meeting. So your mind just won't go all over the place or hectic or in a
Yeah.
panic situation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially if you're prone to anxiety.
we all do. But anyway, I think do we still have a question left?
No, I
Uh,
think we're good.
I think everyone's good. But anyways, guys, since this is the last tech talk for 2025, don't worry, we still have upcoming tech talks by January, of course, on 2026. Um, but since it's already almost holiday, so happy holidays, everyone, in advance. Hopefully we got our Christmas stockings up and hanging already. So anyway, thank you guys for joining us for this last I don't want to say it. Last Tech Talk of 2025, and a huge thank you to our speaker, Mindy. And we'd love to have you back for another session in the future, maybe March or February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gracie, and thank you, Desiree, for all of your help.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
But everyone, be sure to keep a lookout for more live Tech Talks. Although our next Tech Talk, like I mentioned, it's going to be on January. But all event details are already up on our Meetup account. So don't forget to check it out and save your spot. Again, thank you so much and happy holidays, everyone. See you guys next year. Same time, same channel. Thank you so much, guys. Bye bye.